This is the original Call of Juarez being played on native Xbox 360 hardware. I checked out this game for the first time just a little bit ago, and I had only played the later iterations of the Call of Juarez games, that being the Cartel and Gunslinger specifically. And I enjoyed those games for what they were worth. The Cartel was a bit glitchy from what I recall, but I remember having a blast playing the multiplayer back in the day, and I covered that game with some videos on this very channel, so I'll leave a card up if you guys want to take a trip down memory lane. But I was interested to see where the series had begun, what they accomplished as their first outing for this new would-be franchise, and today I'm going to break down my experience and thoughts playing the original game. I must say, I wasn't sure what to expect when I first started playing Call of Juarez. A part of me was actually a bit concerned that this game would have aged too poorly and was just going to be another mess the entire way through. But no, this game is actually fun and even impressive in its own right. At the same time, this is a Techland game, and that means that all of the jankiness, the graphical issues, the engine, the performance problems, all of it is here and present. And let me be clear, Call of Juarez absolutely feels like a Techland game. Remember, these are the guys who would go on to make Dying Light and Dead Island later on. And this definitely feels like one of their games in that you have this wide open space to explore, but sort of the jankiness to the movement, the animations, and you can absolutely see the similarities in the way that this game handles compared to some of their more recent titles. Despite all this, I actually had a fun time playing the game. Let's start with the gameplay elements. Call of Juarez is, at its heart, a first-person shooter. They sort of give you some light control during certain segments to approach missions in certain ways. So yes, you can actually stealth your way through enemies, and there are entire levels dedicated to this. And you also have horse riding and exploration added to the mix, so it's not just straight up gunplay the entire way through. The levels are actually pretty damn large. One level in particular, I was shocked because you have to travel in a general direction towards this large mountain, and you can essentially go anywhere that you want, within that space. And it's massive for a game that was released early on in this generation. You also have certain platforming segments. Your character has like a whip like Indiana Jones, and you can use this to swing yourself across gaps. You can also use this to dispatch enemies, and the wildlife also acts as a potential threat here. And the gunplay, for what it is fine. It's perhaps the weakest element of the gameplay. There's no aim assist, so you have to, play this game much slower than you would other FPSs around. But at the same time, there are certain segments within the game that you can just sort of wreak havoc in. And there's dual wielding, there's weapon degradation here as well. So you have to hand it to them that they really tried to think of everything surrounding the game and put it in here as far as a gameplay element goes. There's also a variety of levels as well. You'll be fighting in old western towns across mountainous regions. There's this cool train level and set piece in the game later on. And I think on the whole, this is a respectable, if not ambitious, first outing. And certainly, this original game, Call of Juarez, doesn't get everything right, but it is playable, and perhaps not feeling too smooth or having aged as well as some other games around this time. We first have to keep in mind that this was a PC game release first, and it later came to consoles, and you can definitely see some of the sacrifices being made here and probably some more concessions the developers had to implement to get this game released on Xbox 360. And actually, on top of that, this game is not available on PS3 or any other consoles, making the Xbox 360 the only way to play this game if you don't have a capable gaming PC. Although given this game's age, I'm sure it would run on integrated graphics at this point. It's also worth noting as well, it's not backwards compatible on Series X, so yes, you'll actually need native Xbox 360 hardware to check this game out yourself. With that being said, let's take a look at the Call of Juarez box art on Xbox 360. We have a pretty classic cover here. This kind of reminds me of the type of cover art we would see with like PS2 era games, so it's quite interesting in that respect. Now on the back here it says, "Ain't no law out here except the one you make." And we have a couple of different screenshots showing sort of the weapons and the combat. Interesting look about the characters there. Now, if we open it up, we have a pretty simplistic package. The disc is actually just nothing but, you know, the Call of Juarez logo and a couple of bullet holes. So, you know, it's pretty, you know, generic there. And then the manual has the same art as the cover, but if we open it up here, it's in black and white. However, there's actually a decent number of pages. It doesn't go into obsessive detail, but pretty much everything that you want to know about is in here. There's a brief look at sort of the backstory of the game. You'll see sort of character profiles, sort of the in-game HUD, and a look at the weapons and some information about the movement there as well. And there's a brief description about multiplayer too. So yeah, it's not some of the more detailed manuals that we see, but you know, pretty much everything that you need to know is there. Interesting ad for WarTech. And then yeah, that's pretty much going to do it here for a look at the cover art for Call of Juarez. Pretty interesting. Now graphically, again, this is a Techland game, and it shows. This is using the third iteration of their Chroma engine, and that means that all of the same quirks, the little annoyances, the intense post-processing and effects work, all of that is present here in the game. For what it's worth, I don't think the game looks bad by any means, but I've definitely seen much better looking games released around this era. In fact, this game, when it originally came out, was actually in 2006. It was ported about 6 or 7 months later to the Xbox 360, and I don't think it's that poor when you kind of compare it to some of the other games released around that time period. It's just that you have those same graphical issues you notice with their previous games like Dead Island. That's all sort of present here. That means you have low resolution shadows, tons of effects work. In particular, you have dynamic smoke and particles, which just look fantastic, but it also buckles the frame rate down to like insanely low numbers. So you have, including this, you have a depth of field effect that kind of runs at a super low resolution. And, you know, it just looks kind of grainy. You have low resolution textures here as well. I would say inconsistent is the best word to describe the way that this game looks. Sometimes it can look gorgeous. Other times it can just look, you know, muddy. I think that the strength, though, in this engine lies in its ability to render large environments without loading screens. And you have appreciable dynamic elements. Like I mentioned, there's fun physics, simulations, smoke and particles, bloom, depth of field, motion blur, there's dynamic shadows. You know, this game can definitely look good, but when you just stop and stare at any one particular thing for too long, you'll notice the inefficiencies. Character models here as well just aren't quite there. They range from looking okay to just downright bad. And it's pretty much what you would expect from an earlier game release from Techland, right? There's really not much more else to say about it. The frame rate could definitely be better here. It kind of runs at an unlocked frame rate, so it's all over the place, to be quite honest. Sometimes you'll get stretches of gameplay that run close to 60 FPS, and it looks fantastic. Then other times you'll be playing in the 20s. So it's not really a great choice when it comes to the technical choices that they designed this game around, you know, but I think it's still saying something that I could still enjoy this game despite all the technical mishaps that it has. And speaking a bit on the sound, this is pretty good as well. The gun sounds are sort of the highlight here. They are loud, they're present, and they work well within different environments. You fire in a mountainous valley and you'll just hear the echoing of the gun sound travel far and wide, and it's pretty cool, very immersive. The guns are very loud and they definitely do pack a punch. The voice acting here, though, it's alright. Like, sometimes it's actually very comical as you play as different characters, and the voice acting kind of bounces back and forth. And it's definitely a hit or miss here. Sometimes I was laughing when I probably shouldn't have been, and other times I was just sort of uninterested in what they were saying. You know, nothing was kind of being delivered with any real raw emotion. And yeah, with that being said, why don't we just get into this story here for a bit. You play as two different characters, one of which is a fugitive who's sort of on the run from a crime he didn't commit, and the other is a priest acting as judge, jury, and executioner, and he's tracking this boy down, hunting him for the crime that they think he's committed. And I have to say that I really enjoyed the priest character in particular. He starts off as this guy who sort of left his old life behind, and the further you play in the game, the more carnage you unravel. He starts to change and morph into this kind of ruthless mercenary, and people sort of know know him and they fear him in this world. I had a lot of fun playing as this character, and he sort of has this like Clint Eastwood, vibe to him. It's just really awesome. The story takes you all over, and I was surprised by this game's length as well. I finished it in around 10 hours, which is actually longer than what you would consider a lot of FPS's games released around this time specifically. And you see a lot of variety within that time as well, especially in the levels. Eventually, the story turns from being on the run into a race to acquire this secret treasure, which is known as the Call of Juarez. So it all sort of comes full circle, and from what I gather, the next game, Bound in Blood, acts as a prequel to this story. So I'll definitely be checking out to see what they did there with that game and how they fared story-wise. Hopefully that they improved on the technical issues that this game has, but I'll leave that for its own video later on in the future. Overall, Call of Juarez was a decent time. It's a game that definitely fits the Techland profile of just being ambitious, but suffering from major technical issues, poor optimization, and just bad writing at some points. But I enjoyed my time with it. It surprised me in different ways, and I'll definitely be taking a look at the other games in this franchise later on in the future, and hope you guys will be around when I do that. Thank you all so much for watching this video. I hope you guys had a good one. Let me know if you played the original Call of Juarez, what you think. Let me know if you played any of the other games within the franchise. It's sort of a dead series at this point. Ubisoft technically owns the IP, I guess. But it'd be interesting to see like a reboot. The Gunslinger game, which was the last release in the franchise, was actually really solid, and it was only an arcade title. So I would really like to see them kind of come back with this. It'd be interesting to kind of have them reboot this game, because I think what is here is definitely interesting and could be really fun, and if they kind of combined it with what they can do graphically with games today, I think we'd have something really special on our hands. So it probably will never happen, but just something I wanted to put out there. Thank you all so much, and I'll talk with you later. Have a good one.